Well, let's go with the first question. Could you introduce yourself, mentioning your name, position, and academic background?
Sure. So, my name is Marco Ranaldi, and I work as an assistant professor in London at University College London, as well as I direct the Center for New Economic Transitions, which is an economic center interdisciplinary within my school at UCL.
Could you briefly explain what your doctoral thesis on compositional inequality was about, in simple terms, like for dummies?
For dummies,
Yeah.
or like for me. During my PhD that I did in Paris at the Paris School of Economics, I introduced this concept of compositional inequality as well as an indicator for its measurement, and then I started to apply this measurement and indicator to the understanding of compositional inequality around the world. So a simple way to describe compositional inequality is if you think about income inequality. Income inequality is about the differences in income between rich and poor. So you can imagine a society with two people, you have one with a lot of income and the other with less income. So we can tell there's a degree on differences in terms of income, and we call this income inequality. However, what we don't know of this society is the extent to which the income of these two people can be different in terms of the type of income that they earn. So what I focused on was considering income and two types of income: capital income and labor income. Labor income is the income that you earn out of your work. So if you work in a supermarket, you earn a salary, which is called labor income. Depends on your labor. Capital income is the income that you derive from your asset. So suppose you own an apartment and you get some rent out of this. This is an income coming from wealth, and this is called capital income. So compositional inequality is the extent to which the composition of income in these two types, capital and labor, is different between rich and poor. So one example is that the rich earn only income from capital and the poor only earn income from labor. In this case, the composition of income between rich and poor is very different. So you have rich capitalists and poor workers. And this describes an economic system which is similar to old classical capitalism with rich capital income earners and poor laborers. The opposite scenario is the one in which rich and poor have similar composition of capital and labor. So rich and poor are at the same time capitalism workers. Now the question is, under compositional equality, is this desirable? Is this good to be in an economic system in which also the poor earn some capital and also the rich work? Is it better than previous settings? So this is the type of question that I addressed for my research.
Great.
Yeah. Real cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Could you share one of the most interesting findings from your research?
Sure. I think the most interesting finding which I found with a colleague of mine who's a scholar on global inequalities called Branko Milanovic, is that when we study the relationship between compositional inequality, so the extent to which an economic system is like old capitalism, rich capitalists versus poor workers, versus a new form of capitalism, which there's no distinction between rich and poor in terms of capital income earners, everyone earn a little bit of the same. So what we describe when we apply this thing and we relate this to income inequality at the global scale is that there seems not to be evidence of countries which are new capitalism, so in which everyone earned a little bit of capital and labor, and society that at the same time display high level of income inequality. In other words, it seemed to be the case that if we have a diversified income composition, income inequality, at least from a comparative perspective, doesn't seem to be very high, like in Latin American countries. So the question is, does this mean that having compositional equality will also help income inequality? That's question that I don't have a precise answer on, but there's much needed for research on that front.
Great. Yeah. Well, the other question is, what aspect of studying inequality do you find the most passionate about?
Well, as you can tell, I mean, I'm very passionate about inequality in capital and in labor and the interrelation between the two.
Well, this is a little hard.
Sure.
Tough.
You can always cut. No, I can't. Okay. Brutally honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally honest.
Totally honest.
So, what do you think are the implications of the increasing number of billionaires in the world, considering that their wealth grows during times of crisis, for example COVID-19, while the rest of the population or some part of the population becomes poorer?
I think this is a relatively simple question in the sense that, of course, from a normative perspective, from an ethical point of view, it's unfair that you have some people that have seen their wealth growing so much, and at the same time, just like a mass of unemployed or people growing and growing. So, of course, from an ethical point of view, it's unfair. From an economic point of view, it's unfair. It's inefficient, I think. And the reason is that, but of course, this is a big debate in economic, and it's very hard to justify with a simple Q&A session. But my understanding is that the more equitable the distribution, the higher the growth of the overall economy. So it's also inefficient to have such a very strong allocation and concentration of resources in the hands of a few, which would not manage to make the most out of this money in terms of job creation, in terms of innovation, new research, etc., etc. So I think it's, from an ethical perspective, it's wrong. From an economic perspective, it's inefficient.
Okay.
Okay. Entonces, in terms of your work, what do you believe are the greatest challenges facing the global economy regarding social inequality?
The greatest challenges are, I think, the greatest challenge of our time, it's the relationship between wealth concentration and the technological change, technological development. So my feeling is that with this new wave of technological development that we are currently witnessing, we see that ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, etc., is increasing and is showing us the extent to which also high-skilled jobs will be replaced by machine in no time.
Yeah.
So this can happen next year, in 2 years, in 5 years, with just like huge short-term consequences. So how do we solve this? At least how do we make sure that we navigate the thing? I think the answer is to redistribute assets and find ways to redistribute the return from technological development, because technological change is always positive for me. I mean, the way I see it is just it's positive and it's inevitable. It just happens. We cannot stop it. It makes no sense to think about stopping it. So the question is, how do we make sure that this new wave of technological development is inclusive in terms of the returns that it generates? In other words, if there's only one company that develop a new patent, a new software, which then absorb the most of the jobs in, say, the third sector, then of course someone is gaining out of this, and this is the owner of the machine, of the software. So how do we make sure that the new income, which is generated through the introduction of these new technologies, is in a way also convenient, just like brings income also to those that will lose jobs? That's why I think having compositional equality, in other words, having assets which are equally shared, implies that if this asset increase and the composition of GDP becomes increasingly more profit-driven, this is to the benefit of everyone. So that's the connection between, I think, technological development and wealth concentration, which should be sorted out.
Well, that was a pretty interesting response.
Thank you.
Well, this is more about you, I guess.
That's personal.
The previous thing was about That's great to keep these two profiles separate, just say yourself.
Yeah.
It's great.
How do you think your studies in economics have changed your worldview?
So I think that economics for sure gave structure to the way I think about world problems. Especially I'm very interested in global inequality and just like taking a global perspective on economics and on the world. And I think just like, how do you make sense of such a big and complex question? The only way is to develop your own technique and strategy to simplify complexity. So I think the most important thing that economics gave me was to just like understand how to use tools from math, from history, from different sciences to simplify complexity. So I think that's the most important thing. And then, I mean, in terms of the subject, in terms of this can change. I'm pretty sure in 10 years from now, we'll be studying completely different things within economics. But what is most important is the method. It's like a way to understand how to simplify complexity.
Okay, and the last one.
Sure.
What advice would you give to an undergraduate student who is just beginning their academic journey?
I just would just give to any undergrad student only one advice. So be creative. That's the only thing. Just be creative, even at the expense of getting a lower mark, because you have been passionate about something and this brought you in completely different, unexpected avenues and took you a lot of time. And I think just like creativity and passion about just like what you really care about, it's key. So just like preserve these two elements, so passion and creativity, to the extreme. Because if this one of the two or part of one of the two will be solved in the future, it's going to be a big problem, because you will just lose interest, and we all collectively will lose just like a new mind, a new perspective. So creativity and passion.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for
Thanks to
everything.
you. What amazing questions. I mean, it's super meaningful.